In the dense twilight enveloping the Vatican gardens, silence seems almost palpable, like a thick veil concealing secrets older than many modern states. Here, amidst majestic marble columns and ancient statues, time flows differently, and within this flow lies a power not usually spoken aloud in Sunday sermons. The world is accustomed to seeing the Roman Catholic Church as a spiritual guide, a guardian of faith and traditions. But behind the facade of St. Peter's Basilica, behind the vibrant vestments of cardinals and the smoke of censers, lies a mechanism operating with the precision of a Swiss watch and the rigidity of a military machine. This is a story of how prayer intertwines with encryption, and confession becomes the most effective information-gathering tool humanity has ever known. In a world where information is the primary currency, the Vatican possesses a gold reserve accumulated over 2 millennia, guarded by a structure whose existence was long considered a myth, a legend for conspiracy theorists. But the shadows gliding through the corridors of the Apostolic Palace are quite real, and their influence extends far beyond the fortress walls of the city-state. When we ask ourselves how the smallest state in the world manages to maintain its global influence for centuries, outliving empires, dictatorships, and revolutions, the answer lies not only in divine providence. Earthly power requires earthly tools. And one of the sharpest tools in the Holy See's arsenal is its intelligence network, often referred to by historians and experts as the Holy Alliance. This is not merely a bureaucratic structure, it is a living organism whose nerve endings, priests, monks, and nuncios, are scattered across all continents, from the fashionable districts of New York to God-forsaken villages in the Amazon jungle. Unlike secular intelligence agencies like the CIA or MI6, the Vatican's special service does not need to recruit agents with money or blackmail. Its agents are driven by faith, vows of obedience, and a deep conviction that service to the Church justifies any means. This unique resource, unavailable to any government in the world, makes Vatican Intelligence the most informed and, perhaps, the most effective organization on the planet. The history of this invisible army is rooted in the depths of centuries, when Europe was torn apart by religious wars and dynastic strife. In 1566, Pope Pius V, realizing that spiritual power alone was not enough to protect the Catholic faith from the Protestant Reformation and the Ottoman threat, laid the foundation for the creation of the first organized spy network. It was then that the Holy Alliance was formed, intended to be the shield and sword of the papacy in the shadow of political intrigues. Initially, its goal was to protect the life of the pontiff and preempt conspiracies. But very soon its functionality expanded to global monitoring of the political situation. Queen Elizabeth I in England, the Huguenots in France, German princes, all of them were under the close scrutiny of men in cassocks, who sent encrypted messages to Rome, written in invisible ink between the lines of theological treatises. This tradition of transmitting information, hidden under the guise of religious activity, became the hallmark of Vatican diplomacy and intelligence for centuries to come. The data collection system built by the Vatican is ingenious in its simplicity and comprehensiveness. Every parish priest reports to the bishop to the archbishop or nuncio, and they, in turn, send streams of information to Rome, to the Secretariat of State. This hierarchical pyramid works like a giant vacuum cleaner, sucking in information about public sentiment, economic problems, political movements, and brewing conflicts. But the most delicate and powerful channel has always remained confession. Although the secrecy of confession is sacred and inviolable from a theological point of view, the overall picture, emerging from thousands of confessions, allows the Church to keep its finger on the pulse of humanity in a way no sociological survey can. Analysts in the Vatican know how to read between the lines, catching trends and threats long before they spill onto the streets in the form of revolutions or wars. This ability to foresee a storm when there isn't a cloud on the horizon has saved the Church from disaster many times. The 20th century became a real test of strength for Vatican intelligence, an era when the stakes rose to the sky and enemies became more sophisticated and ruthless. The rise of totalitarian regimes in Europe presented the Holy See with a complex dilemma: how to survive, preserving its institutions and flock in conditions when the state seeks to completely subjugate or destroy the Church. During this period, one of the most mysterious and controversial figures in the history of Vatican intelligence services comes to the fore: Monsignor Umberto Benigni, who at the beginning of the century created the organization _0_, aimed at combating internal enemies and modernists. However, external threats proved to be far more terrible. The fascists' rise to power in Italy and the Nazis in Germany demanded the mobilization of all of the Vatican's intelligence resources. The Holy Alliance found itself drawn into a deadly game where the lives of millions were at stake. The external conflict unfolded against the backdrop of World War II, when the Vatican's neutrality was merely a diplomatic facade. Behind closed doors, a fierce struggle was raging. Agents in cassocks transmitted information about German troop movements to the Allies, helped shelter the persecuted, and organized communication channels between the resistance and the outside world. But this activity was fraught with immense risk and moral ambiguity. History knows many examples where Vatican diplomats were forced to compromise with regimes to save at least some of the faithful. This __0_ tactic still sparks debate among historians, but from an intelligence perspective, it was a pragmatic game of survival. The Vatican understood that open confrontation could lead to the complete destruction of the Church structure in occupied countries, so a strategy of quiet resistance and information gathering, which could be used in the future, was chosen. However, the most dramatic and intense phase in the history of Vatican intelligence began after the end of World War II, with the advent of the Cold War era. The world was divided into two camps, and the Church found itself on the front lines of the fight against communism, which the Vatican viewed as the main existential threat. The Soviet Union and its satellites declared religion, "one," and began systematic persecution of the clergy. In response, the Vatican activated its "two" in Eastern Europe. Priests behind the Iron Curtain became underground operatives, transmitting information to Rome about the state of the Soviet Empire, the mood of the workers, and the dissident movement. These people lived double lives, risking arrest by the KGB or Stasi every day. Their reports, often written on scraps of paper and delivered through reliable couriers, landed on the Pope's desk, giving him a unique understanding of the communist regime's weaknesses. The internal conflict experienced by these agents in cassocks cannot be overstated. Imagine a priest who vowed to speak only the truth, but was forced to lie, dissemble, use false documents and ciphers to fulfill his mission. This psychological rift ran through the heart of everyone involved in the secret war. How to reconcile serving God, who is truth, with the craft of a spy, which by its nature is based on deception? Many priests found solace in the thought that they were warriors of light in a realm of darkness, that their lies served a higher truth. A unique theology of intelligence even emerged, justifying secrecy and disinformation by the need to protect Holy Mother Church from godless forces. But the price of such a double life was high: constant stress, fear of exposure, loneliness, and the inability to share their burden even with close brothers in faith. Among these invisible heroes were figures whose names would never appear in the calendars of saints, but whose actions changed the course of history. They knew how to be inconspicuous, to blend into the crowd, to listen, and to remember. Their weapon was not a pistol, but words, intellect, and incredible patience. Vatican Intelligence did not conduct siłowych operacji, forceful operations. It did not physically eliminate people. Its strength lay in knowledge. Knowledge of who exactly in the Politburo was ill, who had doubts, what economic difficulties the regime was experiencing. All of this allowed the Vatican to play a subtle diplomatic game, undermining the foundations of the communist bloc from within. It was during this period that Vatican special services converged with Western intelligence agencies, particularly the CIA. The exchange of information became mutually beneficial. Americans received humanitarian data from closed zones, and the Vatican received satellite images and analytics that helped coordinate actions on a global scale. The ideological conflict underlying this struggle went far beyond politics. It was a clash of two worldviews: materialistic atheism and spiritual idealism. For the Vatican, the fight against communism was not just a defense of institutions, it was a battle for the souls of people. In this war, information became a sacred weapon. Every fact about the persecution of believers transmitted to the West became a blow to the reputation of the Soviet regime. The Vatican used its radio stations, its publications, its diplomatic network to broadcast the truth about what was happening behind the Iron Curtain. This was an information war in which the Church, thanks to its intelligence, often found itself a step ahead of cumbersome Soviet propaganda. The paradox was that an organization often accused of conservatism and backwardness used the most advanced methods of information gathering and processing to dismantle a seemingly unshakable totalitarian system. A turning point that forever changed the balance of power was the election of Cardinal Karol Wojtyła to the papal throne in October 1978. John Paul II, a Pole by origin who knew the communist system from the inside, became a nightmare for the Kremlin. With his arrival, the Holy Alliance shifted from passive observation and cautious diplomacy to an active offensive. The new pope perfectly understood the value of intelligence and personally supervised operations to support the solidarity movement in Poland. Funding flows, printing equipment, communication devices, all of this was transported through channels organized by Vatican special services. This was no longer just intelligence, it was a special operation to dismantle the regime in one particular country, which was intended to cause a chain reaction throughout the entire socialist camp. Moscow and Warsaw perfectly understood the danger emanating from the Polish Pope. The KGB and the Polish Security Service intensified their surveillance of the Vatican, attempting to infiltrate their agents into the pontiff's inner circle. A real spy duel began, a war of moles and double agents within the walls of the Holy See. Soviet special services realized that John Paul II was not just a religious leader, but a powerful political player, possessing his own intelligence network capable of destabilizing the situation in Eastern Europe. The tension grew month by month until it reached a critical point. The logic of confrontation relentlessly led to an attempt at a radical solution to the _1_. The culmination of this invisible war was the tragic day of May 13, 1981. The shots in St. Peter's Square shook the world. The assassination attempt on the Pope became a moment of truth when the hidden confrontation spilled out in its cruelest form. Vatican Intelligence, despite all its effectiveness, was unable to prevent the attack carried out by the Turkish terrorist Mehmet Ali Agca. However, immediately after the tragedy, the mechanism of the Holy Alliance went into full swing to find out who was behind the shooter. The Vatican's own investigation, conducted in parallel with the official Italian investigation, led to the so-called «coup» and pointed to the involvement of Soviet special services. This event was a shock for the church hierarchy, finally dispelling illusions about the possibility of peaceful coexistence with the communist regime. The Pope survived, and this miraculous salvation was perceived by him as a sign from above, as confirmation of the correctness of his mission. The struggle continued with renewed vigor, and the role of intelligence in it became even more significant. Now it was not only about political influence, but also about the physical security of God's vicar on earth. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, it seemed that the main threat had disappeared, and the need for such a powerful intelligence structure should have ceased. But the world did not become safer, it became more complex. New challenges replaced ideological confrontation: international terrorism, religious extremism, financial machinations, and global migration crises. The Holy Alliance transformed, adapting to the realities of the 21st century. Now the attention of Vatican analysts is focused on the Middle East, China, Africa, regions where Christians are persecuted and where political instability threatens peace. Work methods have also changed. Along with traditional agent work, cybersecurity and monitoring of the digital space are becoming increasingly important. Modern Vatican intelligence is a hybrid structure, combining centuries-old traditions with the latest technologies. It no longer fights empires of evil as they existed in the last century, but its task remains the same: to foresee threats and protect the interests of the Church. Today's "zero" can be financial audit experts investigating dubious transactions in the Vatican Bank, or diplomats conducting secret negotiations with leaders of closed states. The lessons of the past have taught the Holy See that isolation and ignorance are a path to defeat. The resonance of last century's events is felt even today. The Church understands that its moral authority directly depends on its ability to be informed and to adequately respond to the challenges of the times. Scandals of recent decades related to document leaks have shown that even the strongest walls cannot completely conceal secrets, and that internal security is no less important than external intelligence. Looking back at the history of this unique organization, we see an astonishing paradox. The Church, preaching openness of heart and purity of thought, has created one of the most closed and effective secret services in the world. But in this contradiction lies a deep logic. The Vatican is not only a spiritual center, but also the oldest geopolitical player. And to fulfill its mission in a sinful world, it needs the tools of this world. The Holy Alliance is a kind of immune system of the Church, working in the shadows so that the organism can live and function. Ultimately, everything returns to the beginning, to silence and secrecy. As centuries ago, lamps burn in Vatican offices, people in strict attire read reports that have arrived from the most remote corners of the planet. Technologies change, political maps change, the names of pontiffs change, but the essence remains the same. Somewhere out there, in the invisible spectrum of world politics, operates a force that does not seek glory, does not hold press conferences, and does not report to voters. It serves eternity. And as long as the Church exists, there will be those who guard its peace, standing on an invisible front where prayer and encryption merge into one. This eternal watch continues, and the next time you see a priest calmly walking down the street of a bustling metropolis, consider, perhaps he is not just a shepherd of souls, but also a guardian of secrets on which the fates of the world depend. The silence of the Vatican gardens holds its peace, but this silence is filled with knowledge accumulated over thousands of years, knowledge that is power. This legacy of an invisible struggle reminds us that history is made not only on battlefields and in parliamentary halls, but also in the quiet of confessionals, in the twilight of libraries, and in the hearts of people ready to sacrifice their peace for a higher purpose. The Vatican Secret Service remains a unique phenomenon, proof that faith and reason, mysticism and pragmatism can coexist, creating a force capable of transcending centuries. And as long as the world continues to spin, giving rise to new conflicts and mysteries, the eyes and ears of the Holy See will remain open, attentively observing every move on the chessboard of history, ready to make their own move, which perhaps no one will notice, but whose consequences everyone will feel.